Yeah. Hi, good morning, everyone. Today we have our second episode just in English, but I think it's worth doing that because lately at a meeting I just got to know Conrad Omansky from Omansky Group, and he has a very interesting topic for USR listeners, and that's why we said, okay, let's go for it. Even if it's in English, it's a very interesting topic that we have to discuss today. So my name is Michael. I'm the host for today of CRO Café Deutschland, our podcast around conversion optimization, A/B testing, and many other things, also in connection with psychology. And today I have with me Conrad Omansky from Omansky Group. Hi, Conrad. Nice to see you again.
Hello, and good morning, Michael. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, so our topic for today is how to leverage deep qualitative customer research into website CRO. And I just told our listeners I met you at a meeting lately, where I think you brought up a very catching topic for me. I remember that you raised the topic of forensic interviewing, and told me about your work and how you find out what companies want to know about their customers, about their target groups. And I'm very curious to know more about that topic today. Before we start, our usual question, I'm not sure if you're drinking coffee at the moment, but if so...
I am indeed.
Okay, perfect. Me too.
It's my drug of choice, Michael. My drug of choice, yeah.
Perfect. So how does your coffee look like at the moment? What is it?
It is whole bean, espresso ground, and black. Full stop.
It's very good, yeah. I like it like that as well. I already have my sixth coffee for today. That's why I switched to caffeine-free coffee now. But I hope to jump back on the regular coffee in the afternoon again. Yeah. So, what projects, improvements have you been working on recently? Yeah? What is it that you're currently? What is currently driving you?
Well, to start with, first of all, thank you again. Omansky Group is all about understanding what the customer is all about, how the customer thinks, how the customer arrives at a decision, and we do it qualitatively as a supplement to what you folks do quantitatively. So what we've been doing lately, we've been doing a lot of studies with pediatricians. A lot of our focus is on the healthcare field, and we've been learning about the way these pediatricians make decisions on how they select an electronic medical record. You've heard of an EMR. How they select a particular platform, because it's very, very competitive out there. And when they select an EHR for their practice, it's a very serious decision because it affects how they record all their data from examinations and so forth, and how they work. And as such, we study their user preference in terms of an interface and how they do their data entry for the clinical and business sides of their practices. And we're also studying how they see online patient portals, which is a new trend toward improving the patient's experience. So that's what we've been up to recently.
Sounds very interesting. So what trends do you currently see in the market? Yeah. Is that what you're doing, the forensic interviewing, a new trend, or how would you describe the current market of this sort of quantitative interviewing?
Yeah, thank you. Well, forensic interviewing is a tool. Okay. It's an approach, and I'll get into that later in our conversation. But right now, there are many trends that we're aware of because we work hand in glove with quantitative folks, and we understand how to supplement those efforts. But what we see out there is a lot more use of predictive modeling and artificial intelligence clustering. We see all kinds of predictive analytics using AI. We're seeing a lot of technologies for collection of real-time data, and also a lot of augmented reality, especially for product concept testing. One thing that's happening, it's been happening, is adopting behavioral economics principles. And those are psychological factors in understanding customer decision maker. Well, we've been essentially doing this. We didn't even know we were doing it since we began our business in 1997. Been using very similar principles, actually, from a discipline begun in England called account planning, which ultimately led us to a whole almost unrelated discipline in terms of an interview approach called forensic interviewing, which again, we'll get into later.
Perfect. So we talked about the different methodologies, quantitative analysis versus qualitative analysis. But why do you think is a solid database and analysis important for optimizing websites? What do you see as the main advantage of combining both? Yeah.
You know, the whole question that you raise involves understanding data, and understanding data is important. And it's a big part of the picture that we need to paint. What's that picture? That's the customer and the market scenario that we need to paint a picture of. So yeah, we need to understand data for sure. But equally important, you know, Michael, sometimes more important on occasion, is to be able to understand people and understanding their mindsets, how they motivate, what motivates them, their attitudes, their perceptions. These are qualitative insights that it really boost what we can learn from the quantitative data. It synergizes with that quantitative data. That's really really a beautiful thing when you can coordinate the two. And then what you have is you have data that transforms into what we really need to help clients and yourself make optimized websites, which is customer intelligence. Okay, and that customer intelligence is what allows us to paint that whole customer market scenario picture. Okay, so the quantitative data, you know, it really does help us understand what the customer does or what they did. We need those facts, there's no question about it. You need the statistics, you need the information that this all combines. But the qualitative insights, those help us understand why customers do what they did. And that's what we're all about. It's the why behind customer behavior that gives us the payoff. And what's the payoff? The competitive advantage for your clients. Because, you know, now that allows us to generate strategies, helps us come up with tactics. And those strategies and tactics can really resonate so precisely with the customer's behavior that you can get into the customer's mind so accurately, so deeply, the customer says, wow, you guys really understand me. You really get me. That is the goal here. And when you can resonate like that, Michael, they'll buy. All right. So then what you're doing is you're selling in a way that not only gives you immediate competitive advantage, but it gives you a sustainable competitive advantage. Why? Because you know why, and you know what lies under and behind and driving the customer's decision.
So then let me summarize that quickly, Conrad. So you're saying first you should go for quantitative data and then jump into the qualitative part, more or less questioning this data, finding out the patterns behind it, right?
I'm saying in parallel is ideal. And that is in collaboration with the planning to begin with. That's what's key. And when you can do that, you can optimize the efforts to really understand the customer. Yes, you can do it sequentially. You can do qualitative first. You can do quantitative first. But to coordinate the two is just magical. I mean, in our best clients, that's when it comes together, and it's really a beautiful thing to watch. It's just unbelievable because one supplements the other. One doesn't replace the other. One supplements the other. And you got to have it, as I say, to paint that whole big picture.
Let's have a look at a typical e-commerce client maybe. Yeah? Let's say we are selling fashion. Yeah? What kind of data do I need about my customers? What would be relevant for you if you would be asked for what information should we start on? What methods would you use? Yeah? And maybe you can also talk a little bit about the forensic interview part.
Sure. And absolutely. For us, we're qualitative customer insight specialists. And for us, it's all about the tool we use. The main tool is the direct customer interview. And there's power in that. There's power. We've learned about that in a really well-designed and professionally executed telephone interview. That's how we do most of our studies, do Zoom and so forth, but mostly it's a one-on-one on the phone. And we found it's not just a science, it's an art and a science. And one thing that people may not quite understand is what an interview is all about. It's not a casual conversation between a couple of friends. All right, it's really a disciplined process, a planned and advanced disciplined process. Why? Because you got to meet specific information objectives here. And those information objectives, Michael, are what the client has to agree to up front. This is the way we operate. We have to get the customer's agreement, alignment, buy-in on here's what we want to find out specifically about people who are buying fashion, for example, as you mentioned. But, an interview is successful if it feels like a casual conversation. So even though I said it's not a casual conversation, if it feels like that, then we've been successful. Why? Because we've made the respondent comfortable. And when they're comfortable, they share the deepest beliefs and motivations with us that they wouldn't ordinarily share. So we've been doing this for a long time, and we've developed over that time a proprietary methodology for interviewing. And that's based on what we call forensic interviewing. And what that means is we've refined an interview approach that police and law enforcement uses, but we've adapted them to commercial customer studies. We could spend an hour in talking about the nuances of a forensic interview, what it's all about. Basically, it takes what a criminal investigation technique and adapts it to a friendly consumer commercial means. So you combine the best of both worlds in trying to get to what we call the truth here. It's been a really powerful tool for us. For example, you can immediately establish right from the get-go, just by the couple of verbal cues from the respondent, you can establish and build trust. That's so important with understanding how they speak, their speech patterns, the vocabulary they use. So then, why is that important? Because then we can mirror and match those respondents, customize our communication to them to make them comfortable, to make them and get them engaged. And that's where the success for an interview happens.
So just to understand it, the main difference you're saying is mainly that you don't have a lot of prepared questions, more prepared topics, and you adjust the sort of questions that you are getting to the audience, to their individual behavior, to their tonality and things like that. Or how would you describe the difference between a classical interview and a forensic one?
Well, thank you for bringing up that point in terms of preparation. No, we have many, in most cases, specific questions, specific information objectives that we need to ask. We don't necessarily ask them in a way that's pre-scripted, okay? That's where the magic comes, or the art comes, if you will. You have to make it so that it is in the context of a casual conversation with somebody. That's where the discipline process comes in on the part of the interview. You have to know what you're trying to find out so that it correlates with the quantitative aspects that we need to understand better, dive more deeply into, or we want to explore a whole new area in the qualitatively before we go into a quantitative analysis. But we do have those objectives already planned. but in our heads. Keep those things in our heads and try to make it as casual as possible so that we end up getting to that objective, but get to it in a way that feels like a casual conversation. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
And what that gets us to, now that you made me think about that, is what we call conversational doors, all right, in a give and take kind of framework. What are doors? Those are openings, okay? And we look for, in the conversation within those openings, the doorknobs. And those doorknobs open the doors. And those are hints. Those are kinds of comments that a customer or a respondent makes in the course of an interview. And that kind of conversation, when we follow doorways and open up pathways, okay, those lead to the treasures. What are the treasures? Those are the deep customer insights that we deliver to clients that turn into competitive advantages.
Very interesting point. So what would you say should one optimize for a user interview, if you want to transform what you just said into a regular user interview?
Yeah, well, we actually give seminars in what we've learned about interviewing, and but there's about 4 tips that I would share with the audience today. And the first one is listen. Period. Listen. The best interviewing is when you're interviewing, you're the interviewer, and you're the listener, okay? And that means, no question about it, you should be spending more than 90% of your time during the interview listening, while the respondent, okay, does 90% of the talking. Because keep in mind, it's not about what you know. It's about what the respondents know and what you need to learn, okay? And let me give you an example, if I could, of how powerful the art of listening is. And it's not easy to be a good listener. It takes a lot of discipline and skill to listen while you're listening to somebody and you're formulating what is it that you're trying to accomplish here. But let me give you an example of how powerful it is when you can get somebody to listen to you. Back in the dark ages, there was a company called Vicks, and they introduced, and they're still doing it here in Germany. But in the U.S., they were introducing a new product at the time. It was revolutionary. It was a whole new approach to cold medicine. It was called NyQuil, NyQuil, NyQuil. That was a very difficult name at the time to even imagine that the mass audience would be able to remember, be aware of, or even pronounce. And so the commercial went through the product features, the benefits, and so forth. And then at the end, you had a black screen, okay, and you had the voiceover saying, now, NyQuil is not an easy name to remember, is it? And we understand how difficult it is. So to help you, I'm going to repeat the name for you 3 times, okay? And listen carefully, because it's not an easy name to hear. NyQuil, NyQuil, fade to black, okay? They never had a problem with brand name awareness at that point, because people were forced to listen. And when they were listening, they were expecting to hear that 3rd time. They didn't hear it. But the power of listening is just amazing, okay? So that gets us to number 2, never rush through an interview, all right? It's better to reschedule the whole interview or move on to another respondent. Why? Because, the quality, we've learned, the quality of the conversation is always equal to the quality of the insights you can get from a respondent. And the quality is just driven by an investment of time on both sides. There's nothing magical about that. And hopefully you've had your respondent aware of the time that they're going to have to invest in this. And hopefully they understand that. And that brings us to number 3, which means you always need to schedule these interviews wisely. These are not telephone, cold call kinds of surveys. These are conversations that are scheduled in advance a very limited number of on the sample, but very, very deep in terms of quality. And that means you recruit and you schedule these respondents well in advance of an interview appointment so that they can understand the topic, they get a sense of what it is you're talking about, and if any compensation is going to be paid, and we do recommend some kind of incentive. So that's important to schedule wisely. And finally, don't accept ever a one-word answer. You've got to learn to redirect or refocus or revisit anybody's reply if they're closed-ended or just kind of subjective. For example, if a respondent says, yeah, or, well, yeah, it's better, you always got to follow up with why, or where it's appropriate, so what? Because that leads the respondent, helps you get the respondent to the really usable, deep insights. And it gets you beyond only the simple observational opinions that aren't really that useful.
Yeah, thanks for sharing those tips. I think they're very helpful for audience as well. Just one question around that. How do we make sure that you're not at some point influencing the subject here? Yeah? Because if I understood it correctly, you see the interviewer as a moderator, yeah? Like in the forensic interview part, yeah. But how do you make sure that they are not leading towards already an expected goal, yeah? Because in a forensic interview, you might already know that this is the criminal, yeah, and you just want them to confess, yeah. So how do you make sure you stay objective in it, yeah?
Well, customers aren't criminals, but let's go back to the first tip, Michael. Listen. Just listen, and when you're listening, you're not leading. You lay out the question, and you pursue that question to the point where you feel that the customer or the respondent has given you their fair reality. And really, in terms of the truth is always based on the customer's reality. It's not your reality, it's the customer's reality. So that's why you have to allow that to become the truth and not lead to anybody to any particular conclusion. That's part of the art of what we do as interviewers.
Do you think that every company should consider such qualitative analysis in addition to their quantitative methods, or is this something you wouldn't recommend for every company that you meet? Yeah?
There's a real need for the deep qualitative studies that we do, and it's pretty well recognized as an essential need. Why? Well, because if at the end of the day, you don't genuinely really understand why your customer decides the way they do, then you're essentially guessing about your strategies and tactics. Sometimes, an educated guess works, but why would you want to risk your important business decision when you've got a simple, powerful tool available to minimize that risk? And so a deep qualitative, deep dive interview offers us that tool. With it, you're able to directly and really understand how and why customers think the way they do about your product or your service. And you can do that quickly. You can also do this with a very small sample size. You don't need huge sample sizes for these qualitative studies. In fact, even for a nationwide quantitative study that's professionally carried out in the USA, it's considered to be statistically significant with a randomized sample of 1,000 respondents. That's right, 1,000 respondents, and this is in the USA, where the population is more than 300 million. So then, if you combine this with quantitative data mining, maybe algorithm development, maybe analysis, those things can eventually get you indirectly to the why behind customer behavior. But now you've included real-time, qualitative, deep dive interviews so that you get to deliver an immediate and usable competitive advantage. And what's key to remember is for both quantitative and qualitative customer insight analysis, is you absolutely need to understand the why driving customer decisions on your product or your service before those customers have already moved on to another interest.
Thanks, Conrad. Yeah, it was a really good interview, I would say. Yeah, I hope I played by by the tips that you just provided us. So thank you very much for joining our session today. So my last question would be, what kind of books would you recommend to our listeners? Yeah, if they want to jump deeper into the whole topic of qualitative analysis, what is your favorite readings here? Yeah?
So what I'd recommend, Michael, are a couple of things that would help to better understand customer behavior in the context of cultural considerations and some psychological aspects of customer behavior. First, my top book recommendation would be The 9 American Lifestyles by Arnold Mitchell. And he did that in 1983. And if you don't know who Mitchell was, he was the creator of VALS, VALS, Values and Lifestyle System, which I think most marketers would be aware of. And that categorized consumer behavior by subgroup segmentation. I think, but the most significant, one of those subgroup segmentations was his category number 9, he called the integrateds. Even back then in 1983, Mitchell's category 9 identified a consumer segment, and they're a real challenge for marketers, and they now make a massive impact because these people ignore the so-called trends set by marketers. Instead, they're totally independent. They make their own trends, and they've morphed into today's influencers. And next, I'd recommend a blog called The Honest Broker. And the content creator of that blog is Ted Gioia, and that's Gioia. He's a creator, and he writes a lot of interesting and compelling articles. It covers a whole range of topics from music to consumer behavior, but he's always informative, and he always offers a fantastic way to learn about human behavior inside the constructs of culture, which is always important, and all of which helps us enormously as marketers, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Conrad. Yeah, I think I learned a lot today about this new approach you're providing, and hopefully our listeners will also have some new insights and new inspiration. And yeah, if you do, please feel free to comment on our blog, rate it, and recommend it to your friends. So thank you very much, and yeah, good luck for your business as well, Conrad. Yeah, very interesting.
And again, Michael, I want to thank you and all your listeners for allowing me to share time with you all today. Thank you.
Definitely. Thanks, Conrad.
Cut.
Bye-bye.